Summer routines live or die by how easy they are. And honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the show. Kevin Gorg with you here for another edition of Wooden Sticks. It's a big week for all of us that are hockey fans, specifically at the NHL level. We just crowned our Stanley Cup champion a couple nights ago, and I was a part of the Worst Seats podcast with Anthony LaPanta, filling in for Michael Russo, who was on assignment in Florida at the Cup. Got to see all the excitement there, so that's pretty cool. And I was torn. I'll be honest. I feel bad for everybody up in Canada. I love my years of travel with the team, going to Canada and getting to connect with those fans. They're the best. And especially in Edmonton, man, they've supported that team all the way through. And I think it's, number one, it's great that Connor McDavid got to the final, and brought a lot of new fans along the way, because we live in an era now where video games are so prominent and highlights on social media pop up. He is a guy that does and can take over SportsCenter here in the States. And so I thought the exposure that the Oiler comeback within the Cup brought to hockey was great. The season lived longer than the NBA, so there were a couple of standalone games. There was a lot of drama involved. But in the end, it was kind of cool to see Kyle Oposo, one of us here in Minnesota, a guy that I covered back when he played for the Golden Gophers. I was covering a lot more college hockey back in the old WCHA days. I was between the benches, and I had a great connection with Kyle and used to call him the big dog. And we did a ton of stuff during the game, before the game, after the game. Just a tremendous guy. And then clearly, he played in Buffalo these last few years. And my high school teammate and good friend, Don Granato, was his head coach. And Donnie talked about the impact he had in the locker room, what a great leader he was, made him the captain of the Sabres. And I was blown away. And one of my favorite parts of watching the Stanley Cup when my team isn't there, and more often than not, obviously my team isn't there, is seeing the celebration after. And so obviously the captain, Barkov, gets the cup, skates around. It's a big moment. Cameras are going off. And now the questions become who gets the cup next. And I was guessing, okay, it's got to be the goalie. It's got to be Bobrovsky, late in his career, likely a Hall of Fame goalie. He gets the cup. That's cool. Now I'm like, wow, I wonder who gets it next. And it wasn't even on my radar, but all of a sudden, there it is. It's Kyle Oposo. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy got there at the trade deadline. He's been there for 3 months. This team had, for the most part, been together for 4 or 5 years, had been to the Cup the year before. And there's Kyle Oposo getting the Cup. And then hearing some of the conversation after the game from Paul Maurice, their head coach, and what type of impact that Oposo made in the room. He didn't score a goal in the entire playoff process, but played a valuable role in the fourth line. And he is just one of those guys that players look to. He's big and tough, and he plays the game the right way. And I think he had an immediate impact in that locker room. And so it does tie into our guest today. So great for Oposo, great for the Panthers. Congratulations. But today we're going to have Kurtis Gabriel on the show. And, he didn't play for a long time here in Minnesota, but he did connect with a lot of us along the way, and especially the fans here in both in Minnesota and in Des Moines, where he played for the Iowa Wild. And 6'4", 220, big, strong kid. Had skill. And that's the thing, in this modern era of the National Hockey League, there's no longer room for guys that can just go out there and play 2-3 minutes and drop the gloves and call it a night. I mean, you have to be able to skate and make plays. And Kurtis was that guy. Like, he was a big, strong kid. He could skate. He could make plays. And oh, by the way, if you needed him to drop the gloves, he could do it, and he could do it quite well. And so there's a lot that goes into that, and the psychology of it, and the recovery part of it. I was very close with Derek Bugard, and we still miss him to this day. And I'm very close with Marcus Foligno right now. And those are two guys that remind me of Kurtis Gabriel. These guys on the ice that are quote unquote enforcers and are feared. A lot of times people think they're the they're the jackasses behind the scenes or the tough guys. And usually it's just the opposite. Bugard was a sweetheart. We know who Marcus Foligno is. And I'm going to tell you right now, Kurtis Gabriel, away from what he can do on the ice, and he can mess people up on the ice, I'll tell you that. But off the ice could not be a classier, nicer guy, sweetheart of a man. And so it's going to be really fun to kind of reconnect with him, talk about growing up in Ontario, maybe, seeing a team from Canada in the Cup lose again and what that's like for everybody up north of the border, and maybe talk about some of his heroes growing up. And I know his mom had a huge impact on him getting to the National Hockey League. I still remember his debut back in November of 2015 when the Wild were playing the Winnipeg Jets, and what a special night that was for he and his family. And so going to be a fun conversation. There's going to be some hard topics too. Kurtis lost his dad to suicide. That for any young man can be a horrific experience. And you'll get to see and hear in this conversation just what a genuinely wonderful human being this guy is. And, he's always had a positive attitude. And I think that was part of the reason fans and players alike connected with him when he was here. He just had that way about him. Joe O'Donnell's a mutual friend of ours, and Joe speaks so highly of Kurtis and their time together in the, as Joe calls it, the jungle, because Joe put his time in both Houston and Iowa, did a various amount of jobs to get where he is now as the radio voice of the Minnesota Wild. So yeah, this is going to be a really interesting, great walk through Kurtis Gabriel's career. Drafted by the Wild back in 2013, and he retired at a young age. I mean, he's been retired now for a couple of years, and he's in his early 30s, so he's got a lot more to do, and I'm sure we'll get a little taste of that in the conversation today. Looking forward to it as we circle back with one of my favorites, Kurtis Gabriel, former member of the Minnesota Wild. So fans, it's summertime now. We've seen temperatures up in the 90s, and it's a great time for you to cool off, and the best way to do that is to come to Lake Minnetonka. It's beautiful out here. Beta Bay Boat Club is your hook. It's the country club boating experience, and they've got memberships available right now. They've been doing this for nearly 3 decades. All you got to do is call them at 952-401-3880 or go to betabayboatclub.com. You'll be on the water before you know it. Also want to thank my good friend John Schweitz and all of his cohorts with the Freemasons. When you hear Freemasons, I'm sure you're going to think of the pancake breakfasts and those secret handshakes, but they do a lot more than just that. The Minnesota Masonic Charities would prefer that you think about some of the work they do right here in our community at the Cancer Center over at the U of M, the Children's Hospital, and of course the Masonic Home over in Bloomington. They're just a few examples of the vital work that Freemasons support right here in Minnesota. It's part of the largest fraternal organization in the world, and those Masons have consistently answered that call when it comes to charitable needs. So happy that John Schweitz and Minnesota Masonic Charities have chosen Wooden Sticks to help spread the word of all the great work they do here in our community. Up next on the show, it is time. The big dog, Kurtis Gabriel, the big man, 6'4", 220 pounds, and one of the sweetest, most genuine guys you're ever going to get to know. We're going to circle back with Kurtis Gabriel here on Wooden Sticks after this quick break. Welcome back to Wooden Sticks. As promised, Kurtis Gabriel joins us. He's up in Canada, one of my very favorites. And Kurtis, it's just fun to reconnect. I've done this job covering the Wild for nearly 2 decades, and there are certain personalities, certain guys that you have a connection with. You were always one of those guys, and so really thrilled to have you on the show today.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's funny how we got connected through somebody on social media, and she threw me your way, and it worked out perfectly, didn't it?
Yeah, her name is Mary Cheezick. She's a dear friend and a part of this movie club, which I'll get into at another date. But we're usually having dinner and watching a movie at least every other week. It started in COVID, and we've kept it going now for a few years. And Mary is a huge Wild fan. She's got a big old heart, and she always thought you were one of her favorite players. So it was kind of neat to get that idea and then see this thing come together. And I got to ask you, you're living up in Canada. We just watched Game 7 of the Cup a couple nights ago. And do people that live in Canada all cheer for the Oilers in a situation like that, or are people divided? Because if the Green Bay Packers are playing in the Super Bowl and a team from the Midwest hasn't won it in a few years, I don't think any Vikings fans are cheering for the Packers, but do all Canadians cheer for a team from Canada because it's been so long?
I mean, I can't speak too much. I was just kind of my household watching the games. I wasn't going to bars or restaurants or anything, but I was the lone cheering for the Panthers. And yeah, it seems like everybody's cheering for Edmonton up here.
And it has been a while. And I guess, having been through the Canada trips, season in, season out, we all have our favorites. We all have ones we maybe don't like as much, but I will tell you, Edmonton's such a cool hockey market. Like, even when they were terrible, I'm going back to the Northlands Coliseum those last couple years before they got the new digs and the Oilers weren't very good. It was before McDavid. I can never remember going there and not seeing the building full. So I guess I was caught cheering for the fan base as much as anything. I kind of feel like McDavid's going to win a cup at some point. So it's not like, oh my God, they have to win right now. But for that fan base, I just feel like they're so into the Oilers, and they've been bad until these last few years. Would have been fun to see them get it done.
Yeah, it would have been fun. It's they don't have super much going up there. They're northern Edmonton, or northern Alberta, sorry. So they love their hockey, and I have a friend that lives out there, and yeah, it was crazy. You could see the players were just kind of taking it back. The singing the songs nearing game 6 was wild. Like if game 7 had been there, I don't think the roof would still be on.
Well, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Growing up as a kid, who was your favorite hockey team?
It was the Leafs, just
Yep.
Matt Sundin, watching those guys. I remember one time Sundin had I think it was just in the regular season, but like a slap shot goal from like just inside the blue line on Kippersoft that kind of sold me on that guy's just a moose that can shoot the puck, top shelf. So that was cool. Darcy Tucker, Ty Domi, those kind of days. But as I got older, it turned into Sidney Crosby and the Penguins.
Yeah, and a good pick. They're my second favorite team, and it's because of the connection to Sidney Crosby. I, for years, used to drive down to Faribault and watch Shattuck play, and he was there, and he was still a teenager, young kid, right? And we had heard all the buzz about this Crosby, and this is before he became the NHL superstar he is now. And I went down and watched a game, and I was blown away. And I'm like, when you see a kid on the front end before he's drafted, and you kind of feel like you're going behind the curtain, so to speak, I was like, this is really something. And so then you see him get drafted, and he becomes an NHL player as an 18-year-old, becomes a captain just a year or two later. Easy guy to root for. And then in my on-air duties with, at the time it was Fox Sports North, now it's Bally Sports, but I got to interview him a couple times and literally could not have been a nicer guy. So he's an easy one to root for. And I think the Penguins are an easy team to follow and to root for too. And it looks like they're kind of at the end of this dynasty as far as their run goes. But are you impressed with how he's still able to get things done at this late stage in his career? Because he's coming off a year, Kurtis, where he's just as impactful as he was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, equal parts impressed and equal parts not surprised at all. I mean, he's someone who's going to do everything under the sun, has the monetary means and the connections to do every single possible thing to make his body run as well as possible, to work on his game. That's what he lives and breathes. So I think he's a model for a lot of other guys, how you should take care of your body as you age. But also there's just some guys that are freaks, right? Like you look at Patrick Marleau, obviously a professional, took care of his body, but to be able to skate when you're like 40 years old is out of this world. So we'll see. Sid's he's always been an amazing skater and super strong. So I don't see why he can't keep playing as long as he stays healthy with other kinds of injuries.
Be great for the league to keep him in here for sure. Well, this is Wood and Sticks. So we always kind of to where it all began. And I think one thing I've noticed in my time covering the NHL is most of you guys played more than just hockey when you were kids. You're great athletes, you're professional athletes for a reason. And a lot of times when you were kids, before you just focused on hockey, there were other sports that you played. I'm wondering how many sports you played along with hockey as a kid.
Yeah, I feel like I was or maybe one of the last generations that did play a bunch of sports, kind of how Wayne Gretzky would dominate baseball and lacrosse other parts of the year. So I was a baseball player. I played highest level I could in my area. I was a pitcher, probably better at pitching than I was at hockey ever. Just wasn't the adrenaline pumping sport that I liked with hockey, and obviously wasn't as big in Canada, but played high-level basketball as well, both rep in high school and volleyball in high school, and even ultimate frisbee. Our team won the All-Ontarios one year, which was just our basketball team running down the field, and the hand was just chucking the frisbee up and was going to get it.
Well, in ultimate frisbee, if you're big and tall, like basketball players tend to be, and I know how big and tall you are, that can be a pretty big advantage, right? If you can run a little bit, you've got the reach. So when that frisbee's in the air, you're likely going to keep possession.
Oh, it's a wild sport. Like I think that should have a way more audience than it does. It is so hard to play. It is so tiring and it is so intense. We had some crazy games where we're basketball guys and hockey guys and baseball players, and you think we kind of just out there for a laugh, but no, it's super intense. People are laying out diving for frisbees. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of soccer, rugby, and lacrosse, but I imagine you're not wearing a lot of equipment. So I'm guessing it can be pretty intense.
Yeah, it's so much fun. You can throw both hands. There's a lot of creativity that goes into it. I didn't even know there were certain types of throws, like hammer throws and backhand flicks, all these crazy stuff you could do. So we had a lot of fun doing that. It probably brought us closer together as a basketball team.
You don't hear a lot of guys that play in the NHL say they grew up playing some basketball. I know you're a tall guy, 6'4", 6'5", what have you. Were you able to dunk the ball when you played?
Just barely. I didn't have the biggest ups, and when I did have I wasn't playing when I had my highest vertical when I was training for hockey later in my life. But when I was young, it was younger when I played basketball. So I was just getting it up on the rim and kind of hanging on, just sneaking the ball over. But when I got older and could jump, I could do it a little bit more.
So take me through the journey that led you to being picked 81st overall by the Wild back in 2013. Were you always a big kid? Did you have a growth spurt like in your high school years? And at what point did you realize that, hey, there might be an opportunity at some point for me to land in the NHL, because that's a big dream?
Yeah, I mean, I could go on for days with this story, so I'll keep it as tight and concise as I can with the intricacies. But I was a good hockey player when I was younger. I played at the lower levels, but then I was 10 years old, and my dad got all the releases to leave Newmarket and go play for the Richmond Hill Stars because the York Simcoe Express in my area were loaded. Guys like Barclay Goodrow, Daniel Catanacci, a lot of OHL picks. So I couldn't make that team. So he got me down to Richmond Hill, and I made that team. And actually, Barclay Goodrow switched that year, and it was me and him. He was the known product. I was the kind of guy out of nowhere, and I played there. And then all of a sudden, my dad left my life when he took his own life, and my kind of confidence went down. So I played lower level hockey all the way up to my OHL draft year. I didn't even know what that was. I was just playing for fun again, and my mom suggested I go try out for the junior A team, Newmarket Hurricanes, and I don't know, it was $50 to try out, and I said, why not? If my other teammates were, and I didn't really see a future in hockey at that point, and I went out there and just, man, it was a lot of fun. I think I was always, surprisingly, people may not know this, I was a heady player, a IQ player at a lower age, so I think I played better with the older guys. I wasn't super tall, but I was very immature, and it just all clicked. Everybody's like, wow, you can play. And from there, I went on this crazy ride to the OHL just a year later, undrafted. And once I got to my third out of 4 years in the OHL, when I got told I was going to get drafted in the NHL, that's when it finally clicked that, oh, wow, I can actually potentially play pro hockey. So not till 19 years old for me.
Well, I just think it's fascinating because I know you've got a great relationship to this day with your mom. And certainly when you mentioned your dad took his own life, that puts your mom in a really difficult spot, right? I mean, she's on her own now. And I just think of hockey moms in general, and I'll speak to my experience with my mom. My dad was a golf professional, so we didn't really see him in the summer. And in the winter, it was great. But, hockey players play year round, and I did. I played other sports too. And my mom basically was there for every practice, every game. And without her, I don't get to play the sports that I loved growing up. And I'm sure for you, that was a big, turning point in your life and in your career. If you were going to be a hockey player, you could not have done this without your mom.
Oh, it's absolutely wild. And now staying with her up here and living with her right now, we talk about it sometimes. We just look at each other and I'm like, how did you do that? And she's like, I don't know. You just kind of do it. And we actually, her story made it as far as into a hockey book up here. So she's actually got one of the stories in a Hockey Mom's book. So I think it's pretty cool for her. And she literally went from being like a volleyball, soccer, basketball player to being, I swear she could be like a junior scout, a low level hockey scout. That's how knowledgeable she is. She could definitely pick players and understands the game, and is watching it without me, watches it with me. He's always asking me about it. So she's just an amazing mom who got invested into what her kids loved. And what more could you ask? I would not be standing here talking to you today in the capacity I am without her.
Okay, so draft night's always extraordinary for any kid and for any family. And for your mom and for you personally, I go back to when the Wild picked you. How much did you know, Kurtis, leading into the draft that you were going to be picked? And then what was the actual experience like when you found out that you were selected by the Wild?
Yeah, this was one of the wildest experiences in my life for sure. As I said, I didn't know till halfway through my third year that I was going to get drafted, and being told by my agent that I'm going to go in like the fifth round and maybe the third round if somebody really wanted me, and that we were going to head down to the draft. And I'm like, are you sure? I really don't want to go if I'm not going to get picked. And ended up being the building I scored my first NHL goal in, but New Jersey. And I got there and I interviewed with 23 teams, I think, and they were all driving. I was in Newmarket living at the time, so it was close to Buffalo or close to Toronto. And they would, for the combine, they'd have me drive down and all the teams would sneak me in different like back doors and stuff. So they didn't want other teams to know they were interested in me, and throw my suit on every day and go talk to them. So I ended up talking to so many teams, but the last team I spoke to was Minnesota. I talked to Craig Channel, the Channel Cat, as I heard he's called. And that was at a Tim Hortons for like 3 hours just by my house. And we chatted about life and hockey. So we were sitting there in the third round, and I knew Nashville. It was actually the next three picks were Nashville, Minnesota, then Edmonton. Or sorry, no, Minnesota, Nashville, Edmonton. And I knew all three teams wanted me, and I really thought I was going to go to Nashville or Edmonton. But I said, maybe Minnesota. I talked to him last, and sure enough, and I didn't even hear my full name called. All I heard was Owen Sound, right wing, and kind of blacked out after that. And, my grandpa, mom, stepdad, brother, and my best friend. And then walking down those steps to the main draft floor to get the jersey and meet the staff it's like walking on clouds, that's for sure.
Oh, what a dream. We've got the draft coming up here this week, and I was at a grad party last week, and there was a kid at this grad party, mutual friend of the grad, and he's projected to be a second or third round pick. He's a Maple Grove kid that played at Shattuck, and I had a chance to visit with him and his dad, and just the eyes as big as saucers, so excited, so hopeful. I mean, every kid that plays the game would dream of getting their name called at that position, and just you've lived it. And I watched this kid last week, and his dad is probably more excited than he is. But it's not just the young man getting drafted; it's the entire family that put all the work in to get that kid to that point. So you end up coming to camp with the Wild, and as you first started, making your strides into being a professional hockey player, who were some of the veteran players that really helped you along the way?
To be honest, not too many, to be completely honest. I do know for sure that Jason Palmaville was super awesome to me. Yeah, he'd give me sometimes even just like the short ride to the hotel, which was like a 5-minute walk. He'd drive me just to kind of talk and be super
Cool.
nice. We kind of bonded over sticks. Vanek was super cool to talk about sticks with. There was another guy that was nice, and it was fascinating. He started to use my curve at one point, which I thought was hilarious, being a tough guy. But yeah, no, I'd say Nate Prosser probably stands out the most. I mean, that's no surprise probably to people.
Right.
Just an absolute salt of the earth guy. There's a reason he was able to get so many games up on the roster in the NHL and play so many games, because he was able to just adapt to any role and be a locker room guy and always come in with a smile on his face. So I actually just spoke to him last week and still stay in touch. And he's an incredible man for sure.
Yeah, the processor is one of the sweetest guys I've ever encountered. And again, back to my original point when we started this conversation, the guys that are relied on to stick up for their teammates and to drop the mitts once in a while end up being the best guys. Nate Prosser is that guy. Just one of those guys that's just heart and soul. Every team he played for, whatever the team needed, he'd do it. And every guy loved him. Like, he ran the poker game on the airplane, the number board during the Super Bowl. Like, he's the guy you went to, Kurtis. Like, I love Nate Prosser. He's been on Wooden Sticks, and we've had a similar conversation. And so it does kind of circle back to our friendship and covering you when you played for the team. So let's go back to when it all, when the rubber met the road. NHL debut. It's November of 2015. That's when you really, realize your dream that you are an NHL player. For you and for your mom, what was that night like?
It was incredible. Knew we were playing Winnipeg, so knew I was going to get my fighting time in. Knew it was perfect scenario for me, and I played all my preseason games against Winnipeg. I played all my first two NHL games against Winnipeg, so it was clearly a theme there, and those are my kind of games. So I was pumped, and actually the first time they called me up, I was brought up just to kind of get used to everything, which I thought was kind of cool. And so this was my second time to come play. And I remember just going out and warm up, and I went and stood at center ice maybe a couple minutes into warm up and looked back into the Wild's End. And I'm up on the left side, I had my mom, my stepdad, my brother, and my best friend. And then on the other side, I had Devin Reimerchuk and his father, who's a guy I played with in the OHL, that just took red-eye flights from 2 different locations to come be there, which I thought was super cool. And just standing there and kind of looking at that on both sides, the music's pumping, and that was a really cool experience. I remember that very clearly. And then the game, just kind of one of those games where it's just like you're excited, but you're also tired because your brain's been working overtime to kind of grasp the moment. And I remember like going in on a forecheck and hitting Mark Stewart, knocking him over, and being like, okay, I'm into the game a little bit, knocked him off the puck. And after that, it was mostly just waiting around to fight, but a wicked time to just be proud of yourself and kind of pinch yourself that, okay, it's, my second year pro, I'm up here, and, we'll see where we go from here.
And do you feel like leaving a game like that when you go out there and you do have some success and you play a very valuable role in a hockey game like that, do you leave the rink that night kind of feeling like, okay, I always wondered, but I can actually do this. I can be an NHL hockey player, because there's got to be some mystique involved, Kurtis, with whether your game's going to fit, whether you're going to be able to do the things you need to do to be at that level, the best league in the world. Do you leave the rink that night saying, okay, I know I can do this now?
Yeah, I think it was an easier transition than, for say, me going from major midget AAA, which is not the highest level. Minor midget is when all those guys go to the OHL for the first time. So I was playing major midget AAA and then jumped right to the OHL. That was a bigger jump. You go from cage to visor. Couldn't believe my face was exposed, skating around with all these, even in a small barn, 3,500 people looking at me. I'm just like freaked out because I don't want to make a mistake. But yeah, that going to pro was a great preparation, and then going to the NHL was it felt right. It felt smooth. And I just knew that I would probably settle in with my body and my mind and feel a little bit more normal the longer I was there.
And so as you kind of find your niche, and you talked about it already, like, that when you get called up and the Wild are playing Winnipeg, there's going to be some physical play. There might be some fights. You mentioned it. I've had this conversation with other players that played that role in Minnesota. Currently, Marcus Foligno's that guy. We've had numerous conversations. I go back to Derek Bugard when I first started traveling with the team. What is it like, day of the game, when you know that if things get ugly, you're going to be relied on to be that guy? And do you look at the other roster? Do you know some of the players on the other side that might be involved in these situations? Is it a nervous time? Are you excited? Because I'd be scared to death. But again, I was a goalie and I was 5'9", so I was never considered a guy that's going to go out there and protect anybody. But it has to be something that's on your mind on game day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can tell you for free, it's a hell of a lot better doing it when you're in the NHL. I mean, you can't be more excited. Nobody's scary enough up there to be scared of anybody, because you just feel so good. You're getting paid to play and be in the top league in the world. So I never had an issue getting up for it in the NHL, even when my hand was cut to pieces and I couldn't bend my finger against Reeves, even when my hands were all cut up and I'm fighting, 5 times or 3 times a week, whatever it was in that stretch. That was easy. Where it got hard for me was when it was in the minors, when you weren't feeling your best, when maybe you're kind of feel far away from a call up, or you're not playing your best, or the team's in a slump and you have to, get fired up. And to be honest, the guys down there are 10 times tougher. And those guys do it because they are making a living for their family, and they have to really grind it. So that's when it got tough for me, when I wasn't feeling my best and had to do the hardest of the hardest work. But to be honest, most of the time, pretty excited, pretty jacked up. I was going out there usually to cause, the stuff to get stirred up, and not wait for it to happen. I was going to fire it up. So I always wanted to be shot as a lion, not as a lamb, as I played. And that was kind of what I hung my hat on. And if they had to pull me back, great, but you're never going to have to wake me up.
Our mutual friend Joe O'Donnell calls the minor leagues the jungle, and he's put his time in. He's now the radio play-by-play guy here for the Wild, but he put in many, many years in, both in Houston and in Des Moines. The bus rides, the travel. I mean, it's a different world. I don't think people realize, like, they always get excited when the Wild call up a young guy and he's getting his first look at the NHL level, and you've experienced this, but I don't think the average hockey fan realizes what a grind that is when you're in the minors trying to not only make a living, but also get a chance to get called up to the NHL.
Yeah, really. First of all, touch on Joe O'Donnell. That guy is the epitome of grind and hard work. I was there with him for many years, and he did every job under the sun. You think he did just the radio down there and the TV? No. He did everything. So kudos to him, and I'm so happy that he's up there, and I need to catch up with him. But yeah, it is not a glamorous life down there. Even the top places you're going to play, Hershey, Lehigh, places with great barns and great facilities, it is just not glamorous. It's a very, very hard job, and it's a very, I would say, sporadic league. The really good teams play tight systems and are dialed in, and if you're a team that's kind of got young guys and you're all over the place, it is a true jungle. Things get out of hand quickly. There's old grumpy veterans playing with young skilled guys. It's a very tumultuous place, that's for sure. I can definitely second that you've heard that. It's definitely a jungle, and we would make jokes about it all the time. Or you get on the iron lung with the bus, and you have a bunch of, sometimes grumpy, sometimes happy hockey players who are eating everything under the sun. Guys are drinking in the back. Guys are farting. It's just not the best.
Yeah, I've heard the stories from Joe, and it's a different world for sure. It's a vital part of the organization, and you're seeing players getting called up all the time, especially this past season for the Wild. How much do you watch the team nowadays? I know you retired a couple years ago. Do you still keep tabs on what the Wild are doing, or do you just kind of fall back into being an NHL fan?
Yeah, I just fall back into an NHL fan, but being that NHL fan, I've always been a little bit more dialed in than most, so I can tell you a pretty good amount of rosters and where the team's at and where they're looking to go, all that kind of stuff. So it's hard not to. It just retains in your brain. It just stays in your brain easier than if some other sport goes by, right? It just, you have the familiarity and it just kind of sticks. So I usually can talk about it pretty good, but interesting times there for you guys for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a time of transition, and it ties into John Hines, who took over in season for Dean Evison. You had some time with Hines in New Jersey. What type of coach is he in your eyes?
The best coach I've ever had in my life. Tell you that for free right now. I had him in New Jersey. I was there for my longest stint in the NHL, 22 games. I was on the edge of my seat every time he spoke. In practice, he would literally stop practice when we had a soft team and a lot of guys that hadn't matured yet, and they couldn't handle his style of coaching, which is unfortunate because I think it's the right way. I remember he stopped practice one time and he said, "We are going to practice like we play." And that means contact. That means you play like you play in a game. And if somebody gets hurt, I'll get another guy. And that's where we were as a team. We weren't the best, so he could kind of push it like that. I was on the edge of my seat. I was steam coming out of my ears. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because practices to me were games. That's where I got my work in, to play my 10 minutes, to play my 6 minutes, whatever I got. So I thought he was so detailed, so passionate. Love the game more than probably most of the players, and I think that's what it came out through his pores. Like, he wanted to go on the ice more than us.
I got to be honest, I had no idea you felt that way. I just was curious because I knew there was a connection, and we got to know John this year, and when he took over, and he did a hell of a job. Like, this was one of those years where he came in, the team right away started playing well, and then they had another batch of injuries and fell all the way back again. Then they got healthy, and they once again went on a run. Then they got hurt again. They could never get a full roster out there. But the intensity you mentioned, Kurtis, I see it every single day. Like, his practices were physical, and especially at the end of the year when a lot of times coaches kind of lay back. Not this guy. And I think that's good, because this team right now is a little younger with the cap situation still paying off Parisi and Suter. And so they've got some younger players right now that are trying to figure things out. So I think it's going to be a really good fit, and it makes me feel great hearing what you just said. Now, you mentioned earlier in our conversation when you scored your first NHL goal. How much do you remember about a moment like that? Because like that debut that we talked about when you played the Jets in November of 2015, you get one debut and you get one first NHL goal ever. Tell me about it.
Well, that's what's funny, is everybody wants to ask about the first one, which makes total sense. But for me, the first one was kind of a stinker, and really 2 nights later was the real one. So the first one, I just shot off a face-off. My good buddy Bretzini won it to me right off the wall, and I stepped to the middle and shot it, and it was going wide, and the goalie Nielsen tried to reach up and catch it, and instead of catching it, it trickled down the back of his arm and in the net. So that felt good to get one, but then 2 nights later, that's what I really consider my first NHL goal was against the Montreal Canadiens. It was broadcast back home. They were in a playoff hunt. We were out of it, and just scored a goal that I'm supposed to score, getting in on the forecheck, turning over a puck, getting and beating my guy to the net, tipping a puck and putting in a rebound, and getting to really like feel the goal coming. Like I knew I was about to score instead of just kind of like a random shot, and getting to kind of just let all the emotions out. There's a picture that a guy in the corner got of me where I just stared at the camera and I've never felt that in my life. Just screamed at the top of my lungs and, game winner. And it just, blew my mind, because then I felt like, oh, I can really play here. I can play against a team in the hunt for playoffs, and I can score against Carey Price. I can do this.
And especially in a game that matters to Carey Price and Montreal, that everybody can see back home. Is that something you can find pretty easily with technology now on social media? Can you go back and watch that again? Because if I were you and I was ever having a bad day, I'd want to go back and watch a goal like that just to give me a moment of like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's out there. I didn't have a shortage of moments that are out there. Obviously, YouTube just fight into oblivion. But to see the goal and the different angles and have them talking about it, and it definitely gives me goosebumps. Just a shot of energy that you just can't compare to, right up your spine to your brain. It's just wild feeling.
What a moment! That's so cool. So let's talk about where the game is now, and you've got a unique perspective, Kurtis. So you hear all the time, there's people on both sides of the fence, and you hear these arguments about whether fighting's good for hockey or if it's going to go away. I frankly don't think it's ever going away, but I understand both sides of the argument. Where do you stand, and where do you see the game 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road in terms of the physical stuff and the fighting?
Yeah, I'm kind of right in the middle, and I think that's where we all should be and try to find balance in life. I think, eliminate it probably the way it is in the OHL. I think you get 3, minimize it to the 10 in the AHL and the 10 in the East Coast, and then leave it open for the NHL. I think right where it is right now is solid. It minimizes it, but it also says, hey, if you want to play pro hockey, it's still going to have a taste on a couple nights anyway of the old school hockey. So I like where it's at. It came in that way just when I was, well, not 3. It came into the 10 fight rule came to OHL when I was started fighting. So I think right where it's at is great. Protect the kids when they're younger, let them make the choice, not have to be chased around by guys. And then when you get to pro, realize, okay, this is part of the game. It's never going to leave, just like you said, nor should it. I don't think it needs to be a focal point, but it always needs to be there.
And are we at a place now where we're keeping a close enough eye on injuries? Because I feel like we've made some big strides. I mean, in my 19 years of doing this job, of being rinkside, home games, I'm in that tunnel right behind the wild bench. And so whenever there's anything where a player is injured and there's a stoppage of play because of the injury, a slew of doctors come running down the hall. And now we've got concussion protocol where they actually have to take the player into the office, check the player out. Do you think they're doing enough right now to make sure everybody's safe within the game?
I think they're doing as much as they can. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I had 5 diagnosed concussions, but I probably had another 15 that I just didn't talk about. So at the end of the day, guys are going to have to be honest with themselves. And sometimes it's really hard. And I can't talk from experience because I hid things as well. Because you're trying to play in the NHL. And back then, if you'd have told me you can live till 40 years old but have the career of Sidney Crosby, I would have taken that any day of the week. And now you mature and realize what life's about, and now I would never take that deal. So you can do as much as you can in a game like hockey, though you're never going to be able to limit it, but that's what you sign up for. I think it needs to be told to kids at younger ages, like, hey, you're playing AAA, you want to go play in the OHL? Okay, well, you're going to be playing against some 21-year-olds that are men that are going to try to kill you. And that's not a joke. They're going to try to hit you so hard you quit playing hockey, because that's what I tried to do. And you better be ready for that. You better be prepared for that. And if you're not, don't play. So it needs to be just laid out for guys.
So I'm learning day by day in sports how the value of not just psychology, but mental health. And I think, on the golf side of things, I'm a big golf fan, and I play a ton of fantasy golf, but Wyndham Clark has kind of brought the conversation back to mental health. And Wyndham lost his mom. It was a pivotal moment in his life. And he was a golfer that had a ton of talent, and he couldn't get out of his own way. And a couple years ago, found the right psychologist at the right time. This lady was a phenomenal doctor and got him to kind of reassess the way he treated himself, because when things would go wrong for him on the golf course, he would beat himself up to the point where he just couldn't get out of his own way. And I think as teams now, and even, again, golf is an individual sport, but every golfer has a team of people they work with. And now as we talk about the NHL, Kurtis, I think people are starting to understand a little bit the mental health side of things. For you, as a player that's recently retired, do you see that changing? Do you see it getting to a better place? And how much value is there on the mental health side of things for a player that's going through the ups and downs that we've talked about it in this conversation, minor leagues, pros, producing, living out your dream, having heartbreak? There's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, you can't put a number on it. It's an infinitely valuable thing. We're seeing it the way the world is right now. Mental health is an epidemic. It absolutely is. Suicide rates skyrocketing, especially in younger folks using social media, and how many distractions are around and comparing ourselves to people, and loss, men not being able to express themselves, women going through what they've always gone through, and the way politics are, and taking away their rights with their bodies. You could go on and on of all these factors. And yeah, it's the most important thing. Your mental health is the most important thing. So you're starting to see sports really embrace it. I think only maybe I heard 9 teams in the NHL don't have someone, which is mind boggling. And I think that's completely boneheaded to not. Right. When I was in my last year with Minnesota, they finally brought in someone and allow us to speak to them confidentially. And that's a big part of it. You have to be able to talk to someone. And that's why I want to get into this space and work in this space, because we need more people doing it. And we need more men. There's so many female therapists and female mental health workers and sports psychologists. And I think we need more men, because guys tend to bottle things up, and, you need those man-to-man conversations sometimes.
Do you think if you're able to do something like this, would you be involved in hockey coinciding with the mental health aspect? Because I just look at your personality and how beloved you were, and you didn't spend a great deal of time with the team, but I just remember how much people truly cared about you and loved you. Is this something that you would do in conjunction with hockey, or to be separate from sports?
Absolutely. I'd like to do a bit of both, again, like a balance. I'd love to work with players. Actually, this year, as I go back to school, I'm also going to, because I'm located and can do it online, I'm going to go work and offer my service for free and my mentorship for free to my OHL junior team, Owen Sound Attack. And I'd love to start there and see where that grows. And I'd love to work with players down the road, but as well as the everyday person. And I think we all can do so many things more than we're doing, that most people can anyway, of living a more fulfilling life. And that's the number one thing you can do in life. You can't change other people. You can't impact others. The only thing you can do is really change yourself. And you talk about when you model it yourself and it ripples out. That's what Nate Prosser did. That's why it rippled out in the locker room. That's why he was able to make a career out of it, because his energy and his state of mind, really just came off of and into the lives of others. So I take that inspiration, and I see that that's the only really thing we can do is work on ourselves. And from there, that's how things change and that's how things grow. So I'd love to help people make those changes.
And you mentioned social media. It's so funny because, when I played hockey, we're going back 30, 40 years. And so we didn't have any of that. And I just worked yesterday for the Minnesota Wild. They put on this leadership summit every year, 8th annual one yesterday, where all the captains throughout Minnesota, high school hockey captains, boys and girls, and their coaches are invited to this full day summit at the Excel Center. And so yesterday our speakers were Brock Faber, from the Wild. You had Natalie Darwitz, who's been a GM and a coach in the area, and a legendary female player that's going into the Hockey Hall of Fame next year. We had Trent Tucker, former Golden Gopher and Chicago Bull. Really a cool day to talk about some of this mental health. But one thing that kept coming up, Kurtis, was social media. And you brought this up a little earlier in our chat. And we made the point yesterday with these high school kids that don't get wrapped up into what people are saying, good or bad, about you, specifically like on X or Twitter, whatever you call it. Because I think right now we live in a world where everybody wants some feedback and it's so readily available. We didn't have that when I played high school hockey and college hockey. You guys have that all the time now, and that's got to be a distraction.
100%. I mean, I remember Daniel Chichuk was a high draft pick of the Calgary Flames, and he was assistant coach for me, and Sound for a couple of years. And I remember him telling some guys and me saying, back when I played, like I went up to my junior team and I was away from my parents, and 45-minute drive felt like 3 hours because they didn't come. They were working. We'd call them on a landline, and that was about it. You got so much time to speak to them. Other than that, you're on your own. Nowadays, this was even 8-10 years ago. Imagine the difference now. The amount of distractions is unfathomable. Like it truly is. And the way society is, and it's so materialistic, and it's so get your results now. It's just permeated everything, and it goes down to the athletes and our young people in society, and it just scrambles their brain. Like it takes a lot of effort to really stay focused and be in the moment, and to really be a focused person. So I couldn't agree more. It's something that's a terrible, like most things in life, it's a terrible master and a good servant. You have to use it as a tool and see it that way. It is not your life. It is not a valid portion to spend much time on.
So for Wild fans that are out there, for Kurtis Gabriel fans that are listening here to Wooden Sticks today, how do we keep tabs on you? How do we follow what you're doing? I know you're on Instagram. Are there other places, websites, anything we should keep up with, just so we can kind of keep tabs on your path here moving forward?
Yeah, just Instagram primarily. That seems to be the one that's easiest for me to post. As I said, I'm trying to emulate what I say and walk the walk. I try not to spend much time on it and jump on for updates. I've been updating people on my mental health journey, being diagnosed with bipolar 2 last February 2023. So been having a journey through that, and a big transition in my life right now, coming back to home and starting a new path. So yeah, Instagram's the place, and love connecting with people.
Well, I got to tell you, and I really am excited for you on this journey. And if you go down the path of helping people on the mental health side of things, I'm all for it. If you want anything to do with broadcasting, whether it's a podcast or being on a hockey broadcast, you do have that way of connecting with anybody you talk to. So you'll always have that. Are you interested in doing a podcast on the side as a side hustle? Because man, you have got the gift.
Well, I appreciate that. So when I retired, I did the NHLPA like career kind of focus thing, and they said 2 things you should be doing: entertainment, like broadcasting, or managing people. So I feel like mental health gives me a good area to kind of do both, like because you're kind of managing, but you're also speaking a lot. But yeah, I mean, when I got hurt or suspended in pro, I would jump on radio broadcasts. I jump on the TV with Joe O'Donnell. It's so much fun. I feel like it's almost like it's very hard to make it, and there's so many not so many jobs that come up very often, so I would have to kind of grind it my own way with podcasting. But I'm just going to see how much this course load and with school takes how much time, and how much time I spend with the attack, and see if that's something I might want to do. Anything I do, I want to put my full force into it usually, so that would be something to tackle for sure. But maybe at some point, as I gain some more acumen and have kind of mental health conversations, maybe that would be a kind of podcast to have. But no, I really appreciate the kind words there, man.
Yeah, I can't wait to circle back here a few months down the road and see how things are going for you. You do have that way about you, and I think it'd be fantastic. You're going to impact a lot of lives one way or the other. I have no doubt about that. We're coming to the end of the chat. We always do a thing at the end here, Kurtis, called the Hat Trick Hot Seat, where I throw 3 quick questions at you. There's no wrong answer, and I wanted somehow, some way to tie in to your mom and that cool connection that you have, and she's been this huge pillar behind the scenes to help you have the successes you've had. So I don't know if it's a meal that she currently makes or a meal that she made when you were a kid, but there had to be a meal that, whether it was your birthday or a good luck meal before a big tournament game back when you were a kid, what was your favorite meal, or is your favorite meal, that your mom can prepare or has prepared for you over the years?
Oh, if she heard this right now, this question, she'd be all anxious because she's never been a cook, never wanted to be a cook, never liked it. So growing up, it was like, how much calories in a healthy way can I get to these boys in a satisfactory, time efficient way as a teacher? And so she would make this thing that my dad actually showed her. You literally just throw ground beef, white rice, and steamed broccoli in a pot. You mix that stuff up and cook it, and then put salt and pepper on it. I thought it was the bee's knees, and that just shows you how bland my food palate was growing up. And when I got out into the world, and I'd go to people's houses and have to eat their food, and just be like, why is it all like so spicy and so flavorful, and blew my mind. But now I'm finally got over that.
whatever she was feeding you worked, because I've seen you. You're a physical specimen. So the broccoli, the rice, and the beef sounds just fine to me. And I knew there was something for sure. And I'm glad we can throw your mom just a little bit of love. You don't need to be a great cook to figure out how to feed the boys. Your all-time favorite sports movie, if you could pick one. I know it's hard to just pick one, but if you had to pick one, what would your all-time favorite sports movie be?
I mean, I guess Forrest Gump doesn't count because sports aren't that much of a focus, but I'll have to go with Remember the Titans, no doubt about it.
Great pick. Great pick. So many layers to the story. I'm a movie guy by nature. I see a ton of movies, and that one is top 10 for me all time. Great pick. So now the final one on the Hat Trick Hot Seat. A lot of our listeners are stuck down here in the States and don't realize how beautiful Canada is. I am lucky enough to have traveled throughout the entire part of Canada. If you had to recommend for our listeners here in the States the best place to vacation any time of year, your spot in Canada, where would it be?
Yeah, I guess I'll go with the one I'm more familiar with. Muskoka, Ontario is a beautiful place. It's kind of like it's like the Lake Tahoe of Canada or Ontario, just kind of like the fancy place, like Steve Eiserman, John Tavares, all these Shania Twain. Everybody has a big cottage up there, but there's some like little resorts you can go to that are super chill and cheap, and you can just have like a great time canoeing and walking around and hiking and stuff. So yeah, Muskoka Lakes, that's a good spot.
I think Dean Evison was a guy that told me that in a conversation we had a few months ago. So you're not the first person to bring that spot up. Have you ever been to Banff?
Yes, I have. I could have gone with Banff because I've been there only once, and Vancouver just obviously playing. Those two are probably would offer. Muskoka is maybe a little too much like Minnesota. You guys would be all the same old, same old. So maybe Banff with the mountains and Vancouver with the coastal mountains. Those places are top notch.
Yeah, Vancouver's my favorite place that we visit during the hockey season. Banff is a place I vacationed a couple summers ago, and I was blown away. That is one beautiful part of Canada, no doubt about it. But love your recommendation. And Kurtis, really have enjoyed hearing from you and connecting again with you. And like I said, I really want to come back in a few months and kind of track how things are going for you. I know there are a lot of fans that I've connected with here. I did a podcast live a couple nights ago with Anthony LaPanta. I filled in for Michael Russo. It was a live show, and I mentioned that I'd be talking with you, and I had a bunch of fans that were looking forward to hearing this show and finding out what you're up to. So I really do appreciate you taking the time, talking about the entire process of the story, your journey to the league, and I can't wait to reconnect later next winter.
Appreciate it, man. That's really cool to hear. Yeah, it's funny how you keep having people send me pictures of like a little dog jersey they put on their dog with my name on it or something. It cracks me right out. So I love hearing that people still have an interest, and it's very humbling as a player that wasn't there too long, and I really, really take that to heart. So thank you so much for putting my name out there, getting me on the podcast, and the kind words, man. You're a great dude, and I loved. I think our intermission interview was probably one of the cool highlights of Minnesota time after my first game. So thank you.
Yeah, I sure had fun chatting with you, and the impact is still felt here in Minnesota. They love Kurtis Gabriel, and that's why he has been our guest today on the Wooden Sticks. We'll come back after this quick break and put a wrap on the show and preview what's coming up with that holiday week on the horizon. All right, we're back, and as promised, I just really could have gone on most of the afternoon here as we record this with Kurtis. So many cool stories and so many layers to where he is now in his life and some of the things he might be doing. So we're going to absolutely at some point circle back with him and maybe this winter catch up and find out how things are going for him up in Ontario. And just I loved hearing the stories too of some of the things he did as a kid, just the great athletes these guys are. I never in a million years would have guessed he played basketball, even though he was a big dude and still is. I wouldn't have had that on my bingo card as one of the sports he played growing up. Ultimate Frisbee conversation was cool. And then that journey, right? For a young player in Canada, I can't imagine what a long shot that has to be in your mind. And then when you start to realize that you're on the radar and you've actually got a pathway to the NHL and you get to go to the draft and hear your name called for not just you, but for your family, and especially for Kurtis with his mom, had to be a remarkable time in his life. I got to be there. And that's one of my favorite parts of being a sideline reporter with the Minnesota Wild, are those special moments that you only get to live out one time. And for a lot of these guys, that NHL debut, that first NHL goal, like being a part of that and having the chance to share that with their family. There have been some really cool moments, and a lot of them are the emotion involved behind the scenes, because it takes a village to get somebody to that spot. It is for certain all about that person's talent, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes that have helped that person get to that big spot. And I think Kurtis kind of talked about that throughout the conversation today. I think he'll be perfect in the field of mental health because he's lived it. He's done it. He's been to the top of the mountain, and I'm sure he's had moments when he's been down towards the bottom of the mountain. And certainly great to hear his candid conversation today. And we'll definitely have a part 2 coming here later in the hockey season when the snow starts to fly, and connect with Kurtis again. Next week, we've got the 4th of July here in the States. So wherever you're listening, we're going to take a holiday week. We're going to give our hardworking producer, Brandon, some valuable time off. I'm going to head up north in between race dates out at Canterbury. It's a busy week at the racetrack, but I'm going to get up to Alexandria for a little R&R myself. But what we will do is we'll put out a couple of our original shows. We've been doing this now for a handful of months, and I'm specifically thinking of a couple of shows. Jimmy the Jet, my good friend Jim Jetlin, legendary goaltender from Grand Rapids, member of Herb Brooks' national championship team at the U of M, and just an all-around amazing human being. We're going to send that one back out next week. And of course, we got to go back to the start of Wooden Sticks. And, we go back to Lou Nanne, right? The godfather of it all. We got to get Louis and send that one back out. So those are a couple of shows. Once we get to the holiday next week, I'm really excited to see where Wooden Sticks is going to go here after the draft. We're going to try to get Michael Russo on to kind of put the whole NHL season, encapsulate that, put a bow on that, talk about the draft, specifically talk about what moves the Wild made, maybe some moves they'll make into training camp, some things to watch as the Wild season starts to percolate in September. So we're going to definitely have Michael Russo on here at some point this summer, and really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen today. Kurtis Gabriel could not have been better. Thank you, Kurtis, for your time. We look forward to the holiday week ahead, and we'll connect with you in a couple of weeks right here on Talk North and Wooden Sticks.